I'm here today in the Oblate Lounge in the Rectory with Terry Byrne and Joy Heft, and we're continuing our history series of the Parish. And today we're going to be focusing on some of the history around the liturgies and the ministries at St. Joe's. So we'll start off with you, Terry.
Hi, Chris. Hi, Joy. Thank you for volunteering to come share your perspective of St. Joe's. So, Joy, what actually attracted you to St. Joe's?
Well, it was 1981, and I was expecting our youngest child, actually. And I had a chance meeting with Jean Simon at Parish. She was a parishioner here, and she told me about children's liturgy. And I was really looking for a new parish at that time because I really felt my faith was not being fed where I was. And I also was looking to the future of my children. I wanted them to have a meaningful experience in the church. So that was 40 years ago this fall or summer. And I've been at St. Joe's now. As of that, it will be over half my life.
Wow.
Yeah.
And what was your first impressions when you came here?
Well, I really felt as though I had come home because I felt the level of lay involvement was really remarkable. It was in keeping with Vatican II. And people's gifts were welcomed. They had the marketplace of possibility to invite people to participate in the ministries. The liturgies were beautiful. There was a great deal of attention to the word and to the way it was proclaimed and to the thoughtful homilies, which really fed my spirit. Whenever I went to church, I really felt fed or not, depending on what I heard when I was at church. And certainly St. Joseph's fed my spirit in that way. I really liked the sense of community that probably evolved out of this degree of lay participation. And I can remark, I liked the gender balance on the parish team at the time. There was Jane Williams and Edna Montague, and they complemented one another in their special ministries. Jane, of course, having to do with liturgy, and Edna with the spiritual direction. I also felt it was a good place for my husband, who's not a Catholic. He was welcomed into the community, and he feels very comfortable here. So it really has been a wonderful thing for our family. Our children were all married here, and our grandchildren have all been baptized here.
Good. So can you tell us, Joy, a bit about the evolution of the children's liturgy in the early years?
Yes. When I arrived, it was a smallish group, maybe 25 to 30 children, and it was quite informal. It was led by Maureen King, who was a staff member, and Kathy Bergeron, who was a parent. And then after just 1 year of being here, Jerry Van Rieken took over, and he made it became a little more formal and more structured. And then Jean Simon, who had originally invited me to come here, took over then. And the following year, I actually took over as leader of the group. And in that time, in the course of the 80s, it grew from about 30 children to, I actually have a list that I found in one of my folders. There were 75 to 80 children at that time, and it grew even more, I think, after that. And it was led by parents. There were 25 parents on our team. And we developed a lot of cohesion because we met once a month to plan. And we also tried to fit in with the liturgical themes of the different seasons and so on. And in that time, we developed a great number of resources, tape recorders, and we played music at the liturgies and so on. And we had a lot of arts and crafts and many books. I have the list. And during that time, one of the big endeavors was we held, at our request, a diocesan convention here, to which we invited Marjorie Moffat, a sister, who was the guru of children's liturgy at the time. She lived in Montreal. And so we had to coordinate with the diocese to do that, but it was held over here in the Oblate Hall. And we had teachers and representatives of other parishes. I think we had about 150 people attend. The So I coordinated with Sister Sheila Finnerty, she was my contact, but we did all the planning here. And I think they did pay for her, she charged a fee, and they also, Sister Sheila provided some kind of accommodation for her while she was here. So we had a lot of little activities like Advent activities and so on. I remember making Advent wreaths over in the parish hall. I have a picture of George Lajeunesse arriving with the boughs, or the evergreen boughs, to do that. And I remember even one time someone coming to my house, and we, early before Sunday Mass, we cut grapevine leaves to fit in with the liturgy of the vine, the workers in the vineyard. And another time I made flesh-colored plasticine, if you will, with a young teacher who was helping out to illustrate the formation, how God can form us in his hand. So those were a few of the unique things I think we did. We had a wonderful team of parents and a good group of children.
And what do you think are some of the offshoots of children's liturgy and the benefits that were derived from it?
Well, I think a lot of ministries grew out of the children's liturgy, and among those, so here we have actually some groups of children's liturgy meeting. We had 4 groups of children at the time each Sunday. There were 4 different groups. And then in the mid-80s, or I think it was 86 or 87, Judy Kropp formed a choir. And this is the first little group that performed at a Christmas Mass. They all wore red cummerbunds. That was their outfit, and the parents had to make them. And then out of that evolved a larger choir that was led by Kathy Crow, these 2 over here. And that became, they started they were ministering. Jane was very adamant that the children were ministering. They weren't performing. They ministered at the Christmas Family Mass. And the Christmas Family Mass was started in that time, actually, on Christmas Eve. And it was really because of the initial little choir. There was a bit of controversy about where they should stand and everything when the adults were ministering, as it were. And so at our post-Christmas session, where we talked about the liturgies, I suggested that the following year we have a 5 o'clock Mass on Christmas Eve. And as you know, it's become a very popular Mass. We have the pageant now. Well, we had the pageant, but initially it was just geared to children. We had overheads and things. But then Rosemary Stromanger, who was a part of our team, started preparing children's pageants, directing them, and that became a big thing for quite a long time. I think we still do the children's pageant. Michael Codera actually had a choir in between. He took over from Judy Kropp, and he led it for a couple of years, and then Kathy took over, and Kathy led it for many years. And our daughter, Tara, was in the initial choir, and she stayed in the choir until she went to university. And then our daughter, Rachel, joined, and she was a bit younger, and Karen Okranik was in it, and Rachel and Karen ended up singing at one another's weddings when they got married. And our daughter Tara actually went into voice. She took voice music at university, so you could say that started here. I think David Keyes was another one who did a similar thing.
So just as a part of history, Joy, children's choirs were part of this church back in 1929, when the Sisters of Holy Cross took responsibility for our parish schools. And the sisters actually trained the girls at the school to sing quite nicely. And they were part of the liturgy from 1929 right up to probably around the 1960s. The boys, and you'll see a picture on the far right there, the boys on the left they became a choir when Father Laurie Conlon came here as a curate in 1949, and they weren't as good as the girls, but they developed into a very good choir. And like you were saying before, you know, these boys and girls choirs had their outfits to wear, and they varied over the years. So choirs were always a part of St. Joe's, but like everything, they sort of didn't become as viable in the late 60s, early 70s, until the lay people started getting involved again. So you talked about the importance of liturgies, the quality of our liturgies. What do you can you enlarge on that some?
Well, I know one of the things, you know, when I arrived, Jane Williams was in charge of liturgy and music. And a great attention was paid to liturgical decor. I think we have the legacy here. We've continued a lot of the things that were begun. A lot of, there was a very large choir, and you probably remember that there were some CDs made by that choir.
Yes.
And this week I was speaking to Sandra Bussier-Hellier, who now lives in Toronto, but she told me she still plays that. She plays that CD, or one of them, or two of them, I don't know. And we had liturgical themes for the high holy seasons of Advent and Lent, and the theme was based, a lot of study went into it. It was based on the readings for that particular season. And two of them that I remember are, one of the themes was Called and Gifted.
Yes.
And then there was the Tent of Meeting, and I think there was a desert theme. And I remember there were little gifts, there were little tiny gifts all wrapped and tied, and they were handed out, you know, for the Called and Gifted theme at some stage. And for the desert theme, I think I recall there was sand in the holy water fonts, and you know, it was really quite dramatic. In addition to that, of course, the Holy Week ceremonies were really quite beautiful. And I remember in particular the miming of the Passion, which was always very, very moving. So as the readings occurred, the Passion was mimed, or sometimes it was mimed to music. The word being proclaimed in such a thoughtful way by people coming from the assembly, parishioners ministering to one another also. I just find it's done in such a respectful way. And in addition, of course, is there was the manner in which the Eucharist was distributed and continues to be this day. I know that a lot of thought goes into all of these things, having been on the liturgy committee for a while, I know. So I've always experienced wonderful liturgies here. Yeah.
Julie, is there any other developments or initiatives you'd like to comment on?
Well, the renewal of the liturgical space, of course, that started, I was actually on that committee for 3 years, and I think from 88 to 91 or something like that. It was in the late 80s or early 90s, and it went on for a very long time because the space wasn't actually completely renewed until 2002. I actually have a program of when that happened. And the point was to bring the priest was more among the people. What was happening was more among the people, so that we were really, I think, trying to foster the idea that we are all one. The priest is among us rather than above us, or what, if you will.
Yeah.
With great respect for all of the priests we've had, mind you, because I think a lot of them arrived here having to fit in with what we have already had in place, and it was probably transformative for a lot of them. And I've said to people, you know, I think it takes a lot of humility to be a priest in this parish, because often, you know, they're expected to fit in. Presumably they know that before they arrive. But we've had some wonderful priests. And the other thing I recall is we had an exercise of the life-giving path at one stage. I think that was when the Oblates were undergoing a restructuring. And we did it we had a process in the parish where people could talk about things they would like to see or to happen. And a few of the things that came out of that were we now have a couple of masses a year where we have all three, people from all three masses come together. This was to kind of get to know other parishioners. The practice of adoration of the Blessed Sacrament once a month was another thing that came out of that. And there was an attempted renewal of small Christian communities, which had been something that had happened much earlier, where there were Christian communities from our church meeting in the different areas of the city. That was less successful, but we still do have the Lenten and Advent as small groups here. And there was, I think around that time also, I know it was something dear to Maria Vergie's heart, was the Welcome Committee. Now, I don't know if that was a result of that, but I think it started to happen about the same time, where we had a welcoming ministry, and the welcome table was set up and so on.
So Joy, do you have any further recollections or observations during your life in this parish?
Well, probably if I had a lot more time, I could talk about a lot more things. I think what I would say is that one of the things is community. And I think it's fostered by the degree of lay participation, and we get to know the other ministers. One of the things I didn't mention, actually, that I meant to mention, I was so pleased when I arrived at the degree of social outreach that we had. We didn't have the Women's Center here. There was the Oblate Hall at the time. And the women would stay overnight at All Saints Church down the street, and then they would come here and have breakfast. And there was only one hired employee, and there were many volunteers among the parish who came and spent time there, and the women were free to come, and I think they learned crafts and things of that nature. And then I think there was the beginnings of the supper table, which was quite informal at the time. I think we gave out sandwiches and coffee. And there was the Refugee Outreach Committee, and we know that all of these have flourished. And it's something that I'm very pleased about in terms of the parish. I feel we are living our Christian calling. And I feel also, it's the charism of de Masnod, whom I didn't know, by the way, until 1980. And my daughter Tara started school at L'École de Masnod, and I figured he must have been a trustee or something. And then, of course, it was a year or so later we came here, and now I'm a great fan, if you will, of de Masnod, and I feel I have a little booklet called The Year with de Masnod, and there's a little saying for every day from his writings. And I feel that the parish really represents the spirit of de Masnod, the clergy, and what we do here.
Thank you, Joy. This has been a very wonderful interview, and thank you for taking the time. Now, before we close, we always end with an anecdote. And this time, I'm passing it on to you to provide us with an anecdote.
Okay. Well, many people will probably remember Mary McLaren. She died in 2001, but she was a parishioner here, a member of MAMI, and quite involved. And one of the things she did as a volunteer was she signed in, I don't know if they still do this, but she signed in the guests to the supper table. So she knew them all, and she was really wonderful at it. And when she died in 2001, of course, her funeral was here, and she had been a member of Recovery International, And there were quite a few people who had come to her funeral from that group. And afterwards, we had a reception at the back of the church. I think it might have been the basement then. And I was, going around talking to people, and I sat at one table, and there was an older gentleman and a younger gentleman, and they were chatting, and I assumed they were from the Recovery International, and then they started talking about Notre Dame Cemetery. The younger man was asking the older one, and he said, "Oh, it's okay, I know how to get there," and they were going to take the bus. And then I realized, as we got more into the conversation, that they were guests from the supper table guests who were planning to go and visit her gravesite. And I thought it was a lovely touch. And obviously, it was a tribute to Mary and what she did as a volunteer.
Thank you, Joy, for sharing that with us. Very impressive. And thank you for taking the time to share with us your perspective of being part of St. Joseph's Parish.
Well, thank you for the opportunity.